Hey everybody, welcome to Example of Play, the home for strategy and tactics gaming. This video is going to be a preview of ICBM Escalation, a game that, as you can see, is about the breakout of a nuclear war. This is just kind of like a little exhibition mode in the game that shows off kind of what the full-scale war of the game might look like. And this is a high speed, so don't think it always goes this fast, but just to give you a little idea of what the end game might look like. So ICBM Escalation, I'll just call it Escalation for to be clear, but it's a sequel to a game from Slytherin that came out a few years ago called ICBM, and this is basically a expanded, newer, better version of that. If you never played that, you might have played the game DEF that came out quite a few years back, and that was a game about a similar topic of the outbreak of a nuclear war. But in that game, it was very minimalistic, streamlined, kind of just the bare essentials of having nukes and aircraft and subs, and that was kind of the focus. ICBM took that idea and expanded on it, added a research tree, a lot more different units and things, and it was a pretty good game, but it wasn't. It was kind of a nice step forward as far as if you wanted a more complex version of DEF CON. And then ICBM Escalation, that takes that idea and takes it even further. It adds some new, more factions. You can capture territory. The game can play out in different ways. So we'll kind of step through what those different things look like and give you an idea of what this game is like to play. It comes out pretty soon, but I was lucky enough to get this preview build of it, so let's give it a look. So when you're playing Escalation and you're looking to start a new game, you actually have several options, of depending on what kind of game you want to play. There is also multiplayer, which I think this game would be pretty fun to play multiplayer, but also you gotta probably have kind of the right sort of group, find some people to play with. But there are different modes. You can play Blitz, which is very fast, 15 to 45 minutes. I tried that out. I've tried out all these modes against the AI a little bit. Haven't been able to play against another person, but this one is a short game. It has a simplified tech tree, so it's. I'll show you the tech tree later, but it basically has just a smaller chunk of it that is focused on kind of the core things of the nuclear triad, basically, where the other modes have way more variety of units and more nuanced gameplay. But Blitz is fun if that's what you're looking for, something closer to like that original DEF CON kind of thing. Pretty straightforward. And then it has Standoff, which is expected 1 to 2 hour length. This is kind of the default mode where you're going to get the full experience. You got the whole tech tree, and you have more time and options of what you want to do, but takes a little bit longer. So that's kind of the mid ground. And then it has Conquest, which is, like it says, 4 to 6 hours. This is more like playing like a campaign game. So as you'll see here in a little bit, the tech tree goes from like the 1940s, 1950s through to the present and into the near future. And so if you play in Conquest, that's like a long-term game where you're going to kind of see each of those stages play out versus where these other ones you're going to go through them pretty quickly. In that mode, that's more like playing a campaign, which I say campaign, like playing something like not necessarily like Europe or Universalis, but longer and more gradual, where you're kind of conquering territory and stuff over time. And then there is also the campaign, which is kind of alt history scenarios based on real life, but kind of these handcrafted scenarios. So I played through a couple of these already. You've got this first one, MacArthur's Revenge, which is basically you're playing out the Korean War, but in a very fast paced version of it where, it plays out just like real life, sort of. And of course, you have the option to drop nukes when the communist Chinese show up and your forces look like they're going to get overwhelmed. Do you fight them out conventionally, or do you go with the nukes and see what happens? And then I know the second scenario, I haven't beat it, but it's like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and kind of a similar thing of do you do sort of the historical, or do you go off the walls and see what happens? So there are campaign missions, but we will look at just kind of the normal mode for the most part today. All right, so if we're starting a match, just playing against the AI here, This is what it kind of looks like. You got 10 different factions. They're geographical based in the default. So you have like North America, Central America, Europe. Russia is its own because it's so big. And then different areas. Though there's also a 1980s asymmetric map, which is kind of interesting. It has some very specific things: NATO, Warsaw Pact, but also United States, Soviet Union separately. Um, you could start with those factions allied or not. Um, so kind of interesting, a little asymmetric mode where you've got like Pakistan by itself, the United States by itself, but also like all of NATO. So that's kind of interesting. But we'll look at just the standard map here, and we can just pick like say South America, and then you could pick what technology level you want to start at. So it starts in the atomic age, so like 1940s, 50s, though you can start all the way with like the highest tech stuff right off the bat. So, but we'll just go with the atomic age to start there, just to get the standard experience. So here we are in the game. As you see, we got the world here. You can play with it on a 2D map like this, but I like the globe better just because you get kind of the 3D effect, especially as the nukes and ICBM start flying. Um, so like we are South America. The interesting thing in this game is that though you can conquer territory to get more resources, there's not really like you don't have money or um, resources like iron or wood or anything like that. Really, kind of your key resource is time and how you're going to use it. So if we're looking here, we have a bunch of stuff already built at the beginning of the game that we can throw down. Just to give you some ideas of the sort of stuff. We have, of course, different kinds of aircraft, fighters, multi-role attackers, bombers, army divisions. So ground units can play a pretty big role in your game if you want to. Of course, depending on where you're at and who you're fighting with. There's different kinds of air bases that host different sorts of aircraft. There are pretty robust naval side of things. So you got carriers, destroyers, resupply ships, cruisers, submarines, both nuclear and attack submarines. You can have landing ships to transport ground forces. Those are just, yeah, to give you an idea. You can also form your carriers or your naval units into like carrier task groups where they all move together. And then also we got some stuff like spec ops teams that can on the ground sneak into enemy territory to destroy key locations. If you want to really get down in the weeds and micromanage things, that can be very effective if you pull it off. And then you can have, to counter that, you have like security checkpoints, which are useless except that they counter spec ops teams and that sort of covert action. So the game can play at a very zoomed out strategic level of carriers and ICBMs and stuff, but it can also depend on if you're able to use, like, if you're able to chopper in a spec ops team and your opponent doesn't notice and you use it to knock out some vulnerable radar sites, that could swing the game in your favor. So a pretty big variety of units and stuff. That's just not everything, of course. That's just what you start with to give you an idea. Now we'll look at the research tree. So like I said, your key resource in this game is time. And as you can see, all of these things have a time on them. That's how long it takes to do the research. And of course, if we try to go all the way over here to the right to get like the most powerful nukes, it says 7 hours. It wouldn't really take that long. It's just if you try to research ahead of the tech era that you're in, it takes longer. So we could get like the first nuclear fission weapons 2.5 minutes. But there are so many things to research. And so that's kind of the interesting thing I think about this game. Of course, I haven't played it enough to know there might be some best strategy that's always going to work, but there are so many options to start with. It's hard to think of, what would be the one best way to go about it, because like I said, you can only research one thing at a time. And so really how you spend your time and how you use that to develop your strategy is a really important part. Because look, this is just aircraft. There are, up here we have just the different generations of aircraft, which is kind of the broad upgrade, gives you better aircraft across the board. But then we have all these specific things. You want spy planes, you want AWACS, there's a whole tree just for helicopters. If you look at ground forces, you have kind of similar thing. You got just these broad, make your armies better technology here, but you have like C-burn stuff to counter if you think the enemy's going to be using biological. You spend time to research that to make your guys resistant to biological attacks, or do you ignore it, hope for the best? Or countering that, do you go for biological weapons in your own research? Then, of course, you have ballistic missiles of all kinds of missiles to launch. You have the missile defense, so you can research surface-to-air missiles, but also ways to shoot down enemy missiles coming in, enemy ICBMs coming in. I could just keep going on and on, but there's so much stuff here, and it's kind of worth just looking at them just to think about all the options there are, especially in a game where, yeah, this game might only run for an hour. And so in that hour, which things are you going to be in here researching when there are so many things to choose from that you need to build out your strategy and kind of react to what your enemy's doing? There's all kinds of radar technology, different types of radar. There's kind of the standard ones. There's the over-the-horizon radar. You can build satellites that you can send up into space. You can build counter satellites to shoot down the enemy satellites. But if you have a satellite and they don't, you can see into their territory and they can't do anything about it, which is pretty awesome. You can research things here, like domestic research to resist enemy spying efforts, to make you be able to spy on the enemy, all kinds of stuff. So, like I said, the main thing here is how you can only research one thing at a time. You can queue up a bunch of stuff, but it's going to take time. You can come up here and pick, do I want to focus 50-50 or spend time on more on research, more on construction, or leave it at 50-50. That might change over the course of the game. And so speaking of construction, we have these things built at the beginning of the game, but you can also produce more. And this is just like with the research. There's no money. There's nothing. You can make as much as you want of everything. The question is, everything takes time for you to build. So what do you spend your time on? Especially like here, we've got, do we want to build more bases? Like we start with a couple air bases, a couple army bases, but we could also build more. And we could build specialized air bases. These tactical ones are a little faster to build, but they host different types of aircraft. We got radar sites, which can be built pretty quickly, but you might need a bunch of them. We've got our army units, which you can build more of later, but basically we got army units, we got anti-aircraft units that are mobile. You have engineers that can like carry radar and certain types of bases and structures into enemy territory. You've got all your naval units. You got all your aircraft that you're going to need to man your carriers and airstrips and everything. Here, since I picked the early time start, we don't have any space warfare stuff, but eventually these things will all fill out with space stuff, and then down here just all your different nuclear weapons, because you need to come in here and there's multiple kinds of nuclear bombs that you can build, different kinds of warheads that you can make. So you can make like the biggest ones, you can make dirty bombs, you can make EMPs, all that stuff. So I know that was just like looking at a screen and me talking, but just to give you an idea of the breadth of options in this game, which I think is interesting just as a counterpoint to like DEF CON, if you ever played that, where it's a similar concept, but it was a very simple game, kind of almost chess-like in that there were only a few options and the gameplay was like, how did you use those few options? How did you, what was your strategy with the minimal different choices to go with? Where in this game, it's the same concept, strategy, what are you going to do with your time? How are you going to approach this? But you have like a million different options of what kind of research you're going to pursue, what order you're going to research things in, what kind of stuff you're going to build, which of course is going to depend on what you've researched, but might also depend on what your opponent's doing. So that makes for a very nuanced, complicated, but strategic game. And also, when you're playing against the AI, you can pause, but also the clock is always ticking. So you need to kind of, what you're doing at any given time, the AI is doing stuff all the time too. Or if you're playing against a human player, they're doing stuff all the time too. So time is really the big resource in this game, which I think is very interesting. So now I've rambled on long enough. Let's, just for gameplay purposes, I'll show you kind of what this might look like just starting out a new game, and then I might also jump into one of the other scenarios I've played that's further along, just so you kind of see a game in action. So let's say I'm playing South America, and I'm just going to pick a fight with Central America. So for my research, I do like weapon modernization, make our ground forces a little bit better. It only takes 50 seconds. And then we might go with, let's say, second generation aircraft to make our aircraft a little better. And maybe some better radar so we can see into their territory. And let's say, since we're just playing around here, so we'll research some early ballistic missiles. So you can build some missile sites and then hurl missiles at them, which is pretty useful, especially if they can't strike back at you. Which to that end, we might go with researching surface-to-air missiles. Very, very effective, but they're things you have to build, but way better than the mobile anti-aircraft units, which are okay, but the building the surface-to-air sites, awesome. And then we do start with a bunch of stuff for free. We have 5 army bases, which is more than enough for our purposes here. But the army base is where you can deploy your ground forces to. Like, they kind of have to start there. But it also can defend itself. It also can air transport, so you can basically airlift any army division within range of one of your bases. So that's pretty handy. But starting with 5 of them means we only have this one border to worry about, so we'll stick 1 down here just to, of course, yeah, if I put them all up here and my opponent sees that, they might see, oh, I'll land forces down here in the south part of your country where you're going to take a long time for you to respond, so we'll stick 1 down there just for funsies. Then we'll throw down some radar sites, so you can see these early radar sites, not a whole lot of range. So we'll just put them kind of along the border here. Got 1 more, we'll put it over here just for funsies. And then we have these army divisions. So your ground forces, your big army divisions, kind of generic, but as you can see, you can't deploy it anywhere. You got to deploy it at an army base. So we'll put a couple down there just for to be safe. And then we'll spread the rest along the front here. Then we have 1 air base. So air base can send some aircraft out pretty far. We'll put it there. And then the tactical air base. So your main air base can send out fighters and strategic bombers. And then the tactical air base can send out fighters and multi-role attackers. So a little bit different on what they can do. Strategic bombers, of course, going to be very important for dropping nukes and stuff, but the tactical air base important for fighting the air battle itself. We can throw down these security checkpoints, which have a very short range, but basically they can detect enemy spec ops teams and take them out, but they're not any good against army divisions. Like, they're pretty much just for protecting your vulnerable sites. So we might put them like next to our radar site to keep the enemy from trying to sneak in there and do any damage that way. And again, it seems simple enough, like, oh, sure, my radar site, that's important. I wouldn't want anyone to sneak up on that and destroy it. I just need to put a security checkpoint by it. But when you've got 30 different things you're wanting to build, you might forget to put a security checkpoint around each place. And if your enemy notices, oh, this SAM site defending this area and this radar site are sitting right next to each other and they're undefended, 1 spec ops team, this is the spec ops team, they could just roll right in there and take it out while you're not paying any attention. And so that's where the game can get very interesting. When it's quiet and calm, it's easy to keep track of things. But in my experience, once things start getting a little hectic, the game gets very hectic and stuff can go unnoticed if you don't have a plan in place already. You kind of have to think about what's my strategy as you go, but also be able to react to when the war breaks out. There could be all kinds of stuff going on, especially if you're playing against an opponent who's thought up something creative ways to attack you. And then we'll also throw down, say, a carrier group, which we can create like a little task group and plop them all down together, which is nice. And then we'll put one over here on the other coast. And then they can just move as like one big group, which is handy. And we'll just send them cruising up the coast just to do a little intimidating. And then we'll hang on. So these will be kind of standing reinforcements that can go to our air bases if we want to later. Okay, and then production. What do we want to build? We have plenty of army bases for sure. Decent amount of air bases. We'll just build a few of these AA sites just in case. And then, yeah, there's not a whole lot of stuff. Early game, there's not a whole lot of stuff we can build because we haven't researched anything yet. So we'll build one combat engineers just to have them. Now we hit play. Game's going. I'll show you there's also diplomacy. So part of this screen is intelligence. You can do espionage. You kind of by default are doing all the espionage against everyone, but you can curtail that if you want to. Like if we're in South America, we don't care what Russia is doing. We could turn off our espionage on them, and that basically kind of focuses your resources on just what you're looking at. So like we don't care about Asia or the Middle East because we're just wanting to mess around here in the Americas. So we could turn off some of those, and we would get better results against like say South America or Central America. But right now we don't see anything yet because it's still early game. So like the AA site, the first one I built, it's already done. So I can plop it down somewhere. The army divisions have to go into the army base, but some of the smaller ground units you can just stick wherever. But these guys are mobile. But basically they're just good for shooting down enemy aircraft early on, but very short range. Now, if we want, right now things are very slow, but say we want to speed things up, we can just crank up the speed here. Hit play, and now and it's gonna auto pause for a lot of things, but we're gonna turn on nuclear war mode. Basically, there's no auto pause, which is almost paradoxical. It's like if nuclear war mode starts, you turn off the auto pause because you're getting too many interruptions about all the things going on. But like that's the time when the most is going on, when you might need things to pause. So kind of a interesting dynamic there. So we're seeing Central America. They got some ground divisions, army divisions heading our way. What are they up to? We could send our own divisions up to counter them, which we'll just fly them up there. We tell them to fly, and they'll just take them up there and drop them off. Now, of course, if this was a hot zone, those air transports could get shot down or something, so you gotta be careful about that. Your ground forces also, they can, they're like in standard mode, but you can also put them in forced march, which is like what these guys are, where they move faster, but they're more exposed to attack, or you can tell them to entrench, and they'll be more defensive, but they'll be kind of fixed in place and slower to move. One other mechanic I haven't shown you yet, you can open up this is the war room, and this looks kind of complicated, but it kind of is. But if you want to, you can come in here and you can actually plan out an attack. Like you can say, I want all of my ballistic missiles to target my enemy's radar sites, and you can basically set this up where whenever you trigger it to happen, like you say, okay, now have plan down here, plan alpha. And I can just tell it, okay, when I say execute, all my ballistic missile sites are going to start shooting at my enemy's radar sites because that's what I told them to do, which is can be very handy. There's a whole tutorial for it telling you how it works, and you can have multiples of these plans going. And so that the tutorial explains it all, but it definitely is like next level thinking. I wouldn't worry about it when you're just starting the game because it's a lot to kind of think about. And this is the basic one. Oh, the enemy's attacking us already. Wow. Just before I get to that, though, show you. Yeah, you can actually come in here and like set up very complex plans of units in this area attacking enemy units in that area of specific types and things. So there is a tool here, so you don't have to micromanage everything. You can kind of set up a big strategic level plan of what you want your units to do, and then you can tweak it as you want, and then you can tell it to go in motion when you're ready. So that tool is there, so it's not necessarily a game of micromanaging every little unit, but also that's like, you have to kind of have to understand what you're trying to do before you even go in there and make a big plan. But it's a cool feature, and there's a tutorial that explains all of it. So to finish things off, I just decided I'll jump over to the campaign mission. This is the Korean War scenario, just so you can kind of get right to some action and see the game with a little bit more going on. It's skipping the whole slow build-up process, which is, of course, a big part of the game. But if we wanted to get a little action here at the end, we can do that too. This scenario basically starts with North Korea invading South Korea, and then you, as the US forces, swooping in and trying to rescue them. And then, spoiler alert, the Chinese join the war. Just as you think you're doing great, they show up, and then it turns into a big bloody stalemate where I beat the scenario. And unlike the historical, the war can keep on going, and it doesn't turn into just a slow stalemate. You can, if you want to get the full victory, like end up invading China and conquering a decent chunk of it to force them out of the war. Or you can just sit here and kind of sit on Seoul and just secure it, or conquer North Korea too. But we'll just hop to it. Go in here. Ground forces are going to be a big part of the scenario, so I'm going to research them a little bit to make them a little better. And then get some ballistic missiles. That's useful to kind of pound away at their bases and stuff without risking our ground units. And then building things, we probably want an army base on the Korean Peninsula that we can use, and maybe a tactical air base to give us some more aircraft. We'll start with that, and then some more, few more army divisions would be useful. Because we start with a few here, a few over here in Japan, and a couple in country. This one that we're just going to immediately tell them to get out of there. They're going to get slaughtered. So let's hit go and see what happens. North Korea is attacking. So this ground unit, the army division, they were entrenched, so it takes them a second to get going. And now they're pulling away, but that's because we've got a ton of enemies coming at us. Ooh, we also want to build some radar sites, and then actually we can come over here and shift click to move it to the top, because we want to build one radar site really quick just to get us some visuals on what's going on over here. We got a landing ship here with forces we could land amphibiously. We could go all crazy, send them up here, but I think I'll just send them along the coast here to reinforce our current position. There's another one there. And then if we zoom out, we also have a carrier group. A couple carriers on their way, but they're already heading up to help us out. One thing, if you look at the diplomacy screen here, you can, well, I guess this one doesn't work the same way. In the normal mode, you can click on these and you kind of see like what you know about that country, but it doesn't work the same here, so we won't worry about it. But let's say if we plop down this radar site, we're gonna turn off all these auto pausing. Now we can see a little bit better what's out there. And then I'm gonna have these guys go into the army base, see if they can be flown out of there. Yeah, North Korea is coming at us hard. Let's send in some aircraft to help out. So we can turn that on and they'll just automatically go up to fight, but the enemy hasn't sent any of their aircraft in just yet. And then I could send strategic bombers to bomb their divisions, but that's not very effective. We'll wait till we get some multi-role attackers. Now, of course, this is probably different than you were imagining. You're thinking ICBM Escalation, that's going to be a game about shooting nukes. Where right here, we've just got a big kind of a ground slog going. because no one has nukes yet, or we have some, but we're not wanting to use them just right off the bat. All right, now let's airdrop in some reinforcements. We can drop 3 of these guys in, so we can't drop them right next to the enemy, but we're going to drop them out here on the flank. Since they haven't sent any aircraft up, we're not too worried about ours getting shot down. They're taking some damage, so at least they dropped their cargo before they got shot down. Wish they'd looped out over the sea. And now if we look here, we see, okay, now we only have 1 air transport, so that has to be, you can click there just to automatically build replacements, but right now our capacity is now limited. We can only send out 1 at a time, so that's kind of good to know. Alright, let's see if we can send our boys to go take Seoul back and defeat those North Koreans. And then we got an army base built, so now we can plop that down right here. And any new ground units we build, we can deploy them just straight into in-country and not have to transport them across the ocean. And also that base can defend itself, so it becomes a little bit of a defensive point to help us out. Now we can speed it up a little, since we know we're going to win this fight. Oh yeah, this is going great. And I know what you're thinking. There's Pyongyang. It's right there. Little air base, army base. Look at all our guys. We could go take Pyongyang. Go for it. Who's going to stop us? Nobody. As MacArthur believed, there's no way the Chinese would get involved. We'll just cruise right on up there and take care of business. And then, as it turns out, the North Koreans have quite a few more divisions ready. Now we got some Chinese bombers coming at us, but our fighters are showing up to help out. That's nice. Our weapon modernization for our ground forces is almost done, which makes them just kind of overall better. Maybe we should have waited for that to be done before sending them on the offensive. And we're thinking, uh-oh, not good. Maybe we should pull back. Alright, this tactical airbase is finished, so we can plop that down in the country here. And it comes with a complement of 10 fighters and 10 multi-role aircraft. So we'll send them up. Now you see there's a bit of an air battle going on. Our fighters attacking their bombers. But those early fighters can just get shot down by army divisions. Like, they don't even need anti-aircraft protecting them. So yeah, hubris. We went up there before we were ready. And now the North Koreans are pushing back and could easily overwhelm us. Though now we can crank out some divisions. So that's just kind of give you an idea, as you can see, how not to do it. Don't just go running up to North Korea before you're ready, because they have a few in reserve. And ooh, here come the Chinese with a big, massive army of their own. This keeps coming. So yeah, there you go. As you see, I just lost this scenario, which I knew was going to happen. You do need to be a little strategic. You can't just go willy-nilly, select all, attack, move. It's not going to work out for you too great. Because just now my carriers are arriving that could back me up. They're each carrying 30 attack aircraft. That would be handy, but it's a little too late. Too little too late. Here come the Chinese. They're going to roll right over and take it. Alright, so that was just to give you a little taste of the campaign gameplay. If you play it for real, of course, this scenario will play out very differently. And then whenever you're playing the normal game, it's much more freeform. But just to give you an idea, there are these handmade scenarios too. So ICBM Escalation, I don't know if there was a set release date yet or just soon, end of the year kind of thing, but a pretty fun game. I enjoyed the previous kind of iterations of this, and so I'm looking forward to playing more of it. And thanks for watching. And if you want to see more strategy, tactics, and more, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks. Bye.